Welcome, Impactful Parents. It's time for the Impactful Parenting Podcast, where I give you parenting tips and resources to make you a more impactful parent to your school-age child. I am your host, Kristina Campos. One step ahead of their kids to turn their chaos into connection with their adolescent. I'm a mom of four, a teacher that's taught every grade from preschool through high school. And today I help moms and dads like yourself to navigate that exhausting, confusing, frustrating, but rewarding world of parenting. So welcome to the Impactful Parent. And today I have a special guest. I have Disaster Patrick. And Patrick is prepared for most disasters. But are you? So I invited Patrick on the Impactful Parent stage today because he is not your typical expert. He's not no doom and gloom or no scary tactics, but instead he delivers real, actionable insights from the forefront of the world's toughest disaster challenges. And Patrick doesn't just talk about disaster preparedness. He lives it. And I'm hoping that he can find to give us some insights on what we should be doing right now to keep our families safe under the most likely disaster scenarios. So thank you for being here, Patrick. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation today.
Well, let's start with that you've developed a unique approach for preparing children for disasters. So tell us what that is.
I believe that every child should have their own disaster backpack. And there's a method that I follow, whether it's 9 or 90, every single person, there's a way to categorize what needs to be in those backpacks. But the emphasis that I make to families and parents are, you do not create the backpacks for your children. You do not include a family backpack. There's no family backpack, disaster backpack. Instead, every single member of the family, every single one has their own backpack. And that includes babies, that includes young children, that includes adolescents, it includes every single person in the family, because that is so important that they take accountability for what goes in the backpack, and therefore they have a stake in the result.
And I know that you believe that 99% of disaster plans are a waste of time, and that staying calm is actually bad advice when it comes to you. So for a parent trying to keep their kids safe, that sounds counterintuitive. So what should we be doing instead of trying to stay calm then, if this is what we should be doing instead?
Sure. And that's a great question. And in fact, I get it all the time because people say, I don't understand. Why don't you want me to be calm? I say, I don't want you calm because disasters are not calm situations. I've been through hurricanes. I've been through tornadoes. I've been through terrorist attacks. I've seen a lot of different things in my life. And one of the things I say to folks is, don't be calm, be focused. I want you to focus on what you have to do instead. I train young EMTs. I used to be a medic for many years, and I used to teach EMTs. And so once a year, I go back to my EMT school. And these are people, a lot of times, a lot of the EMTs I run across, these are 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, people who are fresh out of high school. They've never been out in the real world before. And so I say, and so I'll put them through a disaster scenario, and they'll be very nervous. And I'll say, good. I'm glad you're nervous. You should be nervous. This is a nervous situation, but I'm very anxious. Good. I want you anxious. You're going to be anxious. The question is, can I redirect that energy into a focused, critical, productive tasks? Don't try to fight it. Don't waste your energy fighting everything, trying to remain zen calm when you're in, the middle of a Category 5 hurricane. You're simply not going to be. So what instead, I teach this to kids, I teach this to adults, I teach this to Fortune 500 companies everywhere. I say, listen, focus on the task ahead and the calm will follow.
And I'm assuming that once parents have each of these backpacks ready that we've already even talked about, and we'll get into more of what's going to go inside of those as our interview progresses, but that right there, that being prepared for each member of our family, that should help us stay calm or at least contribute to it a little.
Well, what it'll do is it'll give you focus on tasks, because when you and I talk about what goes in those backpacks, I get people to the point of focus very, very easily. And I get kids focused really easily. And the reason is because the trick is that you empower the kids. You empower them and say, you're not powerless in a disaster. You're not powerless in a massive earthquake. You're not powerless in a tornado. You are not powerless in any of these things. Instead, I give you the trust that we can build this together so that you have a backpack that makes it so that you can be effective and you feel like you've gained the control back. So, for example, recently, I just did a YouTube video with a 7-year-old, and he and I built a wildfire shelter made entirely out of school supplies. It's never been done before. And so we built this entire structure. So we used poster board, and we used yardsticks and pencils. And then I covered it in lighter fluid and I lit it on fire, and it actually stayed. It didn't burn or anything like that. And the smoke actually stayed out of it. And he and I worked on that together, because I said to him, you are just as important, because to let you know that you don't have to be some far-flung expert. You can create a shelter just for you out of supplies, totally accessible and in your reach.
Now, with those backpacks, are we doing one backpack and any disaster could just come our way? I'm assuming that's the only way we could plan. Otherwise, we'd have several different backpacks for several different disasters, and that just seems overwhelming. So let's clarify and get into that a little bit. What are we looking at there?
You should have one backpack per person inside the house. Now, one of the things I recommend, though, this doesn't necessarily apply to every single person, particularly people who just stay home all the time. But for kids who go to school, I tell them you should carry a little pouch in your backpack that actually carries a few necessary supplies in it. So if kids are doing that, they should have that. If kids are going to camp, do they need to have a backpack with them? Yes, they do. If the kids are traveling somewhere by themselves, do they need to have a backpack with them? Yes, they do. And it doesn't mean they have to carry this whole huge backpack full of tons of supplies. That's not what it means. There's actually a really efficient way. We don't unfortunately have time today to discuss it, but there is a trick that I've used with kids, because I come from 6 generations of elementary school teachers and principals both. And there are certain things that kids can carry with them that if there is a disaster at school, they can reassert control regardless of what the disaster is and what the school's response is.
And I love this because we want parents to come to you for more information. So if this is resonating with them today as we're talking about different disasters, don't forget, audience, we're going to be giving you his contact information toward the end of this so that you can reach out to Patrick and discover so much more, because this is just the tip of the iceberg. We can't deep dive today, but you certainly can after this podcast is over. Now, most parents feel overwhelmed by this idea of a disaster plan. And just to be honest, most of us don't even have it. I don't know why we cross our fingers, hope for the best, and figure that it's just not going to happen to us. But what are the 3 things that a family actually needs to know to survive that first hour of crisis?
You don't need a disaster plan. You don't need a disaster plan. And finally, you don't need a disaster plan. I have a method that I've used for a long time. I started using it when I was working. I started working with Fortune 500 companies, and then I started working with high net worth clients, and then I started applying it to middle class families I was working with. There is a method that I use where you do not have to write down a single thing. You don't have to write down anything. And through what you put in the backpacks, what you put in there, I can replicate precisely what you would need to have in a disaster backpack. So if you follow the method that I'm going to talk to you about, literally, I could take your backpack out. I could take it out for myself, and I can open it up, and then I should be able to instantly tell you how you can evacuate, how you can shelter in place, and how you can lock down. in any situation. And it's the genius of it, because I want to make it so that you don't have to write anything down, because, hey, I've been a disaster professional for 20 years. I don't write anything down. Why would I want to? So there's a method that I've used that's more realistic. It's a revolutionary way. It's something that I've developed over my time working in this field. And it's something that I think could work for everybody, because your backpack itself should be the centerpiece of your disaster response. And that's the shift I want everyone to have. And that's why I place so much emphasis on the fact that you do not have to have a written plan, no matter what you hear in the media.
One of the things that I hear you talking about is you teach a 5-pocket method for teenagers. And a lot of our audience has adolescents. So tell me more about this 5-pocket method. If a teenager is heading to school or a concert, what are those 5 things that they should have on their person that could possibly save their life?
What I want people to realize is this. You should always, 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 whether you are 9 or 90, you should always have enough disaster supplies on you to get to the next location of refuge. So I want you to think of yourself and your preparedness network like a series of like nodes or refuge areas. So one thing, or like relay stops. That's the other thing. When I talk to teenagers, I think of it like a relay. Like you can go to different locations, because here's the key. Regardless of whether you remember what I tell you today about the 5-pocket method, here's what I want you to remember. The key is this. You need to maximize your options. You should have multiple ways to evacuate, multiple ways to shelter in place, and multiple ways to lock down anywhere you are. So kids who are going to concerts, do I expect you to carry a disaster backpack? No, of course not. I wouldn't carry one but there are things you can carry on you. So the 5-pocket method, so let me kind of talk to you a little bit about that so that people understand kind of what they are. We don't have time to go into every little thing that needs to go in each of the pockets, but I will at least get you started on it. So the first pocket is physical. So the physical side is a lot of things that we are thinking about. So when kids go to concerts, when kids go to schools, do they need to have a mask with them at all times? Yes, they should. Absolutely. It doesn't have to be some bulky gas mask. It just has to be a mask, what's called an N95 mask. We have them in California where I live. We get wildfires a lot. But no matter where you are, and in fact, what happened in Hong Kong recently, they had that horrible building fire, those apartment fires. And then in Switzerland over the New Year, they also had massive fires. And one of the things that happened was what inevitably occurs, which is people, there was so much smoke inhalation that it disoriented them and they did not know what to do. So that's one of the things I talk about. So on the physical side, how to breathe. The other thing is how to see. And how to see is simple. Carry a small flashlight on your keychain, whatever, something like that, or just hook it on your jeans pants. So something small so that you can absolutely remain oriented that way. And then the last one is, I tell people you should have some kind of small eyewear, just something that you can place so you can visually see where you are, because concerts, fire is the biggest problem. That is the biggest thing to think about. There's a lot of other things we could talk about with the physical stuff. Water and food. We're not going to talk about that today, and that wouldn't apply to a concert. The second one is psychological. So I talk about things that people can have to remain focused. And for teens, I usually say things like, take a Nintendo Switch or carry some entertainment with you, something that can get you focused. And then the personal side, I talk about keys, I talk about glasses, I talk about pharmacy. Do you have to take all that stuff to concerts? No, of course not. But do you have to have enough to be able to get to a couple locations where if something were to occur, that you would be able to do that? Yes. So I empower them with evacuation tools, not tools for sheltering in place, because you're not going to shelter at the concert. You're going to find some other place to go. And then the last two are easy. Papers. I always tell every single person, no matter what their age is, you should have ID on you at all times. And that includes small children. So there always are ways to get identification for them. You should be able to know, they should be able to know that. And it should be age appropriate. For teenagers, I always say, carry your ID with you at all times, no matter what. And then the last one, I don't have to explain this to anybody. It's a phone. Should you have your phone with you at all times? Yes. And when I say phone, I also talk about ways of communicating. So depending upon what people do, I say you have to communicate. But again, it's all age appropriate. So you have those things in the 5 pockets: physical, psychological, personal, papers, and phone. Those are things to some extent, no matter how much we don't have time today to go into it. But no matter what, even if you have just enough to get home, just enough to get to your car, just enough to get to your storage unit, whatever, then there's more supplies there which help you to get to the next location. That is the key. And that is why you don't have to have a big, bulky written plan.
And this is perfect because I want parents to realize that we are preparing our kids. This isn't to scare them. This isn't to get anybody nervous. Just like anything else in our parenting, we are preparing them for what something might happen, whether we prepare them if they were to get into a car accident. Well, what do you do if you get pulled over, or get into a car accident if they were doing something like that? This is the same thing. We're preparing our kids for whatever might happen. And there's one thing that you mentioned that I want to dig into a little bit, and that is your Nintendo Switch rule. I found this really interesting as I was looking at your stuff and, reading all about you before our interview today. And you advocate for putting things like a Nintendo Switch or maybe their favorite snacks into the disaster kit. And I want you to explain that a little bit, because why is this escapism a legitimate survival strategy for our kids and teens?
Because children, especially teens, can be overwhelmed very rapidly because of their brain growth. I work a lot with mental health professionals, and we talk about childhood development. And I work very closely with them on dealing with kids and trauma. One of the things that we have discovered is that kids have to be taken away from what's going on around them. So I say a Nintendo Switch because I want them to forget about what's going on around them. You cannot, and I was a medic during Hurricane Katrina, you cannot constantly be in a state of alert. That will tire you out. It will wear you out. You will not be able to function properly and maintain, again, not the calm, maintaining the focus of the tasks at hand. So what instead I tell people to do is I use the Nintendo Switch as a metaphor, but for teens, it's very literal. I say literally, if you like your Nintendo Switch, please put it in your backpack. Take it with you, because you know what? You can put the earbuds on and focus on a gaming system, and it takes you away from everything around you. It's the same advice I give for adults. For those of you who are parents, and I say to them as well, take something with you. You don't have to tell anyone what it is. Whatever it is, some object, playing cards, anything like, a photograph, a book. I mean, I have a book I take with me everywhere, and I really like to read from time to time. And so when I'm in a disaster, it takes me away from what's going on, because we recognize there's a lot of things you're going to need to do. But for teens especially, they may not communicate the fact that they are feeling overwhelmed. That is very, very possible. So one of the things that I say to do is give them escapist entertainment so that they can go somewhere else entirely on their own.
Now let's talk a little bit about the logistics of running a household during a bigger disruption, like a pandemic. Of course, we've experienced that, but any scenario where we need to hunker down in our homes for a little bit, whether that might be. And I know that you suggest families prepare for a 10 to 14 day bubble where they can't leave the house. And so I'd like you to talk a little bit about what's the one item that most parents forget to stock that causes the most stress in these 48-hour and longer lockdowns that we might encounter.
Well, we just talked about it a moment ago, which is the psychological end of things, because I think a lot of people forget and don't realize the fact that there are objects and things that can have a massive impact on you. So one of the things I suggest, beyond just talking about the Nintendo Switch, is I say this to parents all the time: have food that your kids will enjoy. Have something that would be considered a treat that you have on. You should have it with you at all times. It isn't like there's well, we can go a few days without it. No. You don't go one day without it. You always have it with you, because kids need to be put in a position of comfort. because disasters are going to create uncomfortable situations. So what's going to happen throughout disaster response? It's going to be like it's like waves. It's like sound waves. I mean, you're going to have times where everything is up and it's getting a little better, and then there's times where it's really bad. And so at those points, kids need to have food they recognize. So one of the things I say, for example, is when parents buy emergency food for their kids, you know what's the first thing I tell them to do? Sample it. Make it tonight for dinner. Like, try it out, because the disaster is not the time. It is not the time to sample that food for the very first time. And the reason why I talk about making sure you get the right kind of food or having treats that kids like, because you know what? That applies to adults too, is having something that always takes you away. So for example, I don't pretend like this is, I don't lie about this. I am a nervous flyer. It doesn't prevent me from flying. I fly all over the world, but I've always been a nervous flyer. I was in a near airplane crash when I was very young. And so I've always been a nervous flyer. So I love ginger ale. I think ginger ale is like is the best. I never have it. Except when I'm on planes, because that's a treat that I can look forward to, that I can say, this is not going to be the most pleasant 6 or 7 hour flight for me, but that's okay. I have something with me that just when I taste it, it feels good. And so food can make a huge difference. So get something food related that doesn't necessarily have, doesn't have to have, thousands of calories or be an MRE, those brick foods they have. Get them something they're going to enjoy. That is something that will help you, particularly if you're being sheltered for multiple days at a time.
This is so important, and I'm glad we're talking about it, because it's not the typical things that I know parents were probably thinking that you're going to say, and why I want them to listen to this right now and then dive in deeper with you after the show. And along those same lines about mental health during crises, you talk about this thing called the gasp, and it's referring to the seconds immediately after a disaster hits. So what is the very first thing that a parent should say or do to actually seize control again of the room when, let's say, the lights go out or the sirens start blaring? What do we do?
Tell the kids to grab their backpacks. Give them something to do immediately. Don't try to corral them. And I know this. I have been in disasters with kids. I was a shelter manager with the Red Cross, where kids were there, and this was fresh after the hurricane had made landfall and people's homes had been destroyed, and kids were starting to get upset. So one of the things that I do, and actually I train this in classrooms. I do this all the time. I turn to teachers and I say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a fire drill. And they say, okay, sounds good. And I say, but you're not going to be involved at all. And the teacher goes, well, what do you mean? I said, you're not going to have any participation. You're going to watch. That's it. They are going to grab the backpack. They're going to grab the roll sheet, and they are going to evacuate themselves to the field without you. And the reason why I do that is because I want kids to know you're empowered. Kids get afraid when they feel like they don't have control over the situation and they don't have the intellectual or emotional maturity to really understand, or the life experience to understand what's going on around them. So that's why I love the backpack system and the 5-pocket method, because it instantly gives them a way to say, I have regained control, because that gasp. The gasp is the moment that I tell people when a disaster strikes, you go, okay, I don't know what to do, because you're exhaling going, so what do I do now? And I say, during the exhale, go get your backpacks, because at least it gives you a center. Because now, no matter what goes on around you, in that backpack, you have food, you have water, you have first aid supplies. So you have tools at your disposal to start doing things. And what I find happens is that as soon as people open the backpacks up, they don't have to even use the equipment. They at least feel like they have something around them that can instantly ground them. And now they can start moving forward. Because what happens that when there's a lot of uncertainty, that's when people make very poor decisions, and kids get panicked as we all can understand that. So what I say to kids is, when I run disaster drills, the first thing I tell them is, get your backpacks, meaning your disaster backpacks. And I do that when I go into classrooms. I train kids on their own disaster plans. I say, bring a backpack in that has disaster supplies, have this, have that. And so they'll come in, I'll spread the backpacks out, and I'll create a simulation. The first thing I'll tell them is grab the backpack. And they do that, and that instantly grounds them to say, now I know what's the first thing to do. It centers them, and now they think, okay, what's next? And it helps them to get back into that spot, because there's a series of decisions I teach them. And I find that when they grab the backpack first, their decision-making process goes up exponentially.
And I want to ask you about families with fur babies, because they're like our children too. And I know
Absolutely.
kids get worried about them, but what is your golden rule to help with pet evacuation? Or what do we do when we're all in a hurry? And of course, it's an emergency situation. We're trying to get everybody out, but again, we talk about these fur babies. They are our families, and yet what do we do with that? That is such a torn place for any parent to be in.
It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be at all. And let me explain how I mean. You know how I was saying before that every member of the family should have a backpack? Every single furry friend we have should also have one. So should we have a backpack for every dog we own? Yeah. If you own a horse, should your horse have a backpack? Yeah. If you have a cat, should they have a backpack? Yeah, absolutely. Every single pet where you say to yourself, there's no way that I could leave my pet behind, there's no chance, then you should have a backpack for that furry friend. Or because just like you said, they are family members and kids are not going to leave. So what I tell kids is I say, grab your backpack and grab the backpack for the dog or for the cat or whatever. Yeah. And what ends up happening is that the kids now they're not so anxious about the cat. Now they're not so anxious about the dog, because they say, you know what? I've grounded myself. And then you know what it also does? It gives the kids something to do. Remember, I was saying we need to give the kids things to do. Guess what? That gives them something to do, because I can say, okay, there's a lot of things going on, and, the dog is really scared. And so let's go ahead and put the dog in a good situation. Now the child becomes like a caregiver. They're turning into a leader. I've instantly made them a leader because they are in charge of that pet's backpack. And so in developing those backpacks, one of the things I say to kids all the time is I say, don't leave that house. Do not leave your house without that backpack. Do not leave without that backpack. And so what ends up happening is it takes the burden off of parents for having to do everything, because sometimes I see parents doing this all the time. I'll take care of it. I'll take care of the animals. That's a waste of time. You have a lot of other things going on. Let's parse it out, because I actually talk about this, when I keynote from time to time, is I would say, where the best emergency responders are in the world? Kids. They are fantastic, because they'll do exactly what you ask them to do, because they remember this stuff. They remember it better than adults. And they are able to think very clearly, but you have to empower them. You have to say to them, you can do it. And I'm not just saying you can do it. I've given you a manifestation of that. We have developed a disaster backpack, keyword here, together. And that's your backpack. That's not my backpack. That's not, someone else's backpack in the family. It's yours. And so what ends up happening is kids then turn around and say, I can do this. I can handle it.
Let's talk about schools, because in this day and age, and I hate to say it, I'm recording here in Colorado. We are very aware of our school preparedness here, as it's so important. So how should a parent evaluate a school in order to figure out, is my kid's school ready for a disaster?
Well, one of the things you do is you go to their drills. If they're having a drill, try to come to it. But you know what, in the end, you know what I tell parents all the time? The school may or may not be prepared for disaster. That's okay, because your child is prepared for a disaster. That's the most important thing, because if something is going on chaotically at school, if the kids know that you are trusting them with their own disaster response, they can then regain that control, because schools can be very, very chaotic places during disasters. And your kids will be so much more prepared if in advance you've given them the tools for them to be prepared on their own. Now you've taken the burden off yourself. You've taken the burden off the school to do everything, because this is what I tell people all the time about school disaster plans. I want you to treat them like ice cream. Nice, but not necessary. And I say that because if a school doesn't have a disaster plan, or they haven't trained anyone, or they haven't drilled on it, I don't want you to have to rely your entire disaster response on that. Instead, what I want you to do is focus on the individual, focus on your children and getting them individually prepared, because then even if the school is not adequately prepared, that's okay, because they have the tools to succeed, even if the school doesn't.
If parents are listening to this and they are resonating and they want to empower their kids for these type of situations, where can they get a hold of you? How can we find out more? Because you have so much more to offer us, and you are an amazing resource for our impactful parent community. So tell us, how do we get a hold of you?
Well, my website is disasterpatrick.com. We're doing some incredible things there. But one of the things I tell parents is I say, I have 30 videos. I call it the 30-day challenge. So I'm challenging you parents to create a backpack for yourself, and then have your kids work with you to create their own backpacks. And I have 30 videos going up on my channel. It's Disaster Patrick on YouTube. And on there, every single one of those days, we start with an empty backpack on day 1, and you have a full backpack by day 30. So I tell you exactly what to put in the backpack. And then on the weekend, I give you fun little trainings to do and little drills to do for yourself, like, spend a day and work in the dark, try it out. Do your flashlights work? So there's a lot of really fun things that I have in there for parents to be involved in. And I can't talk about that without adding this. I'm doing something very special this year. I have designed, and we're building right now, the world's first FEMA rated hurricane shelter. And we've made it entirely out of Lego bricks. And so I'm taking it from Los Angeles to Maryland, and we are putting it at the University of Maryland's famous wind tunnel. It'll be going 200 miles per hour. And we plan on setting a world record. And it's going to be a real emergency shelter. I've designed it and built it with my scientist colleagues and others, because this is going to be something. And I'm doing this for kids every month. I'm also developing a Lego challenge where I build some object for use in disasters made entirely out of Lego bricks, because I want kids to realize you can do this too. This doesn't have to be awful. And I want parents to realize you don't have to do this on your own. Kids can do it, and I want to empower you to do that. So I want you to go on my channel, watch these videos. We're recording this in early January, and we're just starting to put these up. They should be all up by the 30th of the month. And I will say this too, is that please comment and ask for more videos. We're doing a ton of other ones with kids, because I want parents to realize you're not alone, and I'm here to help you in any way I can. If you want to contact me directly, go on my website, disasterpatrick.com. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed coming on today. It was a lot of fun.
And I'm going to end with one last question for you, and that is how to be an impactful parent in this area. So my question to you is, what is the most impactful thing a parent can do for a child preparing for disasters?
Turning to a child and say, you can do it, and you can do it even if I'm not here. So you are helping them to create a disaster backpack for themselves, and saying, That's how I'm doing it. I'm trusting you. For those of you who are a little reluctant, I can tell you right now, I have done this with kids from coast to coast. I've gone to classrooms and schools, and I'll come to your school even to do this, which is if you turn to kids and say, you can do it, and I'm trusting you to do it because I know you can, you would be amazed. I will turn your kids into elite emergency responders, and you can do it too. That will make you a truly impactful parent, because your kids then turn from those that you have to corral and you've got to figure it out, and it adds to your overwhelm, to instead making them team members and valuable additions to your disaster response.
Thank you for listening today. Remember to subscribe and share this podcast with a friend. And don't forget, the Impactful Parenting Podcast is an extension of the Impactful Parent community. Go to the Impactful Parent website and download the free Impactful Parent app so you don't miss a parenting tip that can help you and your family. Thanks for listening today. So go to theimpactfulparent.com and see you next episode.